Going to teach you how to make a grid on a piece of paper in this video. I'm going to show you some tips and tricks that, some mistakes that sometimes people make. Here are three different types of grids. So this first grid here is 1 inch square. And then this grid is a ½ inch square. And then this is a centimeter square. Notice the difference between centimeter and ½ inch. They're really close, but they're also different. So notice that. I have a ruler here, and I want to show you something. I'm going to kind of zoom in here on the ruler. I want you to notice these green marks. So please keep in mind this is not a math class. So if you are not comfortable finding ½ inch marks on your ruler, I'll take a Sharpie and I'll mark right on the ruler so you know exactly where to mark. So please let me do that. It's not a problem. I also want to draw your attention here on the ruler to the edge. So when you're beginning to make your marks, you don't want to start with the edge of the ruler. You want to start with the first line that's on the ruler. That line represents 0. The edge of the ruler does not represent 0. This is a mistake students often make. So make sure you start with that first mark. To begin with, we're going to do a 1 inch grid. And so I'm going to show you how to do that now. So I'm lining up that mark, not the edge of the ruler, on the edge of my paper. And 1 inch is probably one of the easiest ones. Don't mix it up with centimeters. So a lot of rulers have inches on one side and centimeters on the other. And then you just find the mark that is connected to a number. So if you look closely here, even though I've written on it with green, there's a 1 and there's a 2. So the number shows you which mark we're looking for. So I'm going to make a mark at each one of those numbers, the line that's connected to that number. I'm going to do that all the way across. Very important while you're doing this that you don't let your ruler slip. And then at the end, if you're doing a regular sheet of paper, which we will be, there'll be a ½ inch left. Now, here's a mistake that students often make. They'll make this set of marks and then they'll just begin drawing lines across their paper. And what will happen is your lines will be crooked. They'll be sideways. So this is probably the most important thing you can do to not have that happen. So I've made the marks. I'm just going to slide my ruler directly across the paper, and now I'm going to make the marks again. So I've got 1 inch marks all the way across, holding that ruler so it doesn't slip. Now we're going to start to draw some lines, and this is also an important step. A mistake that students often make when they draw these lines is they draw them really dark. So I hold my pencil close to the end. I've lined up these 2 marks. Let me move my paper so you can kind of see that. So I've got a mark there. I want to make sure that they're the correct marks. I'm lining up the edge of the ruler with those, and I'm just going to draw very lightly. I mean, you can barely see that line on the camera, but it's there. I want to draw very lightly because if you make a really great drawing, you don't want to see the grid. You want to be able to kind of make the grid disappear. So I'm drawing very lightly, just barely holding my pencil, and I would do that all the way across. So I'm not going to do that on this video because you don't need to watch me draw lines, but I'm just going to show you again how lightly these lines are drawn. They're there, they're just really hard to see. So now I'm going to turn my paper. I'm going to use the exact same technique. I'm going to line up the edge, not the edge of the ruler, but the first mark on the end of the ruler. And I'm going to make 1 inch marks all the way across. And this one should work because this paper is 11 inches wide, so you should have 1 inch marks all the way across. I'm now going to slide the ruler down because I don't want my lines to be crooked. I want them all to be nice and straight. And I'm going to make the same set of marks again, all the way across. Even these marks, so I'm noticing as I'm doing it, these marks that I'm making, they're a little bit dark. I probably don't need to make them so dark. It might be difficult to erase those later. Once I have those marks on both sides of my paper, and I'm going to very lightly draw lines to connect those marks. So again, I'm just holding the pencil down at the end of the pencil. That helps me to hold it more lightly. All right, so you can see on my paper I've begun to create a 1-inch grid. So what I'm going to be asking you to do is to create a 1-inch grid, and then on the back side of that same sheet of paper, I want you to make a 1/2-inch grid. Now, on a ruler, let me grab another ruler real quick. So you can see one that doesn't have the marks on it. If you want to find the 1/2-inch mark, they've made these handy lines on the ruler that are all different lengths. And so in between the numbers, so here's a 1, here's a 2, the longest line represents 1/2 inch. Now again, if you're like, oh, it causes me stress, I don't think I can find that line, it's no problem for me to mark on your ruler. You can see here I've marked 1/2 inch on the ruler. And then the rules are the same, so I'm going to line up not the edge of the ruler, but the first mark on the ruler, and I'm going to mark 1/2 inch marks all the way across. I'm not going to mark them all the way across on this video because I don't want to get you guys to work. So I've got 1/2 inch marks, and I'm going to slide that ruler directly across. Sometimes, this is another mistake sometimes students make. They'll turn their paper around, and they'll begin to mark from it's the opposite edge, and depending on what you're measuring, that won't work out. So it's very important when you're measuring and marking to just slide the ruler directly across from where you were just working. I'm lining up again the edge, not the edge of the ruler, but the first mark, and I'm going to make 1/2 inch marks every 1/2 inch. 1/2 inch grid should be smaller. And so once you've made your marks, this is a mistake students sometimes make, is they'll line up with the wrong, accidentally, they'll line up with the wrong marks, and you can see that line is crooked. That's not the way I want. So be careful you don't do that. Once you've got your marks lined up, go ahead and very lightly, again, want to draw these lines lightly, draw your line to connect them. Obviously I would want to erase that mark, but that's how to draw a grid. Remember, your assignment is to draw a 1-inch grid on one side of your paper, and then on the back side of that same piece of paper, I want you to also draw a 1/2 inch grid. Good luck. Hope it goes well.